Hey guys, how are ya? All right, so now we're to the hand sewing part of this corset, which I'm gonna do this by hand. Um, I'm gonna be using a curved needle and just some black thread. And I don't want to go through and through to the other side. Like, I don't want the inside to be a mess. So I'm going to show you how to do it so that you can keep the stitches on the surface fabric and still tack everything down so it all stays together. And while I'm doing this, I can tell you a story about working on, how about Beyonce's Formation World Tour? Back in, I forget what year it was, 2014? No, it's probably like 2016, whenever Formation World Tour was. I like to tell people, how did you get this job? Because I feel like, everybody wants to know, how'd you get that job? How'd you get that gig? Okay, first I'm going to show you. This is the way I knot my knots is actually a, what do you call it? Embroidery technique. It's just a ball, like a French ball knot. Let me do it again so I can show you. Okay? Because everybody always asks me this. So I wrap it around my fingers and I make a cross, and then I roll it off the end of my fingers. And then I pull it down, and then it makes a nice ball. Nice big fat ball. And then if there's a little bit of bits on the end, I just cut them off. So that's how I do my knots, okay? And here is, I just took a length of thread, and I'm gonna start by hiding the knot. So I'm gonna hide the knot in the embroidery here, okay? I'm just gonna hide it in there so that my big fat knot is underneath one of these little bits of embroidery. So the first thing I'm gonna do is just kind of start tacking this down a little at a time. And I'm gonna just make small stitches on the top, and then the bigger stitches are on the bottom. So I'm just gonna start with the first stitch and make sure my little fringes don't get stuck in the stitch, because we like those little fringes. And then I'm just gonna work my way up this edge to tack this down, and then we're gonna go that way. And what's nice about this is the kind of lace this is. If any of my threads show, they're just gonna blend into this mesh that's part of the lace pattern. But I'm using the curved needle so that I can see. So there's a little, you just gotta be careful. There was a little teeny knot, I just pulled it out. But I'm gonna bury, by using the curved needle, I can just go really shallow and not go, I'm only gonna go through the top layer of fabric. So this corset has 3 layers of fabric. It has this is a crepe back satin, which I love using this fabric. I buy this on Fabric Wholesale Direct. It's really nice and thick. It's got a matte back. It's called crepe back satin, a nice shiny satin finish, and it's really cheap. It's like $4 a yard, but it's really nice thick fabric. And then on the inside, I have a layer of canvas, and then I used the lining of the same crepe back satin fabric for the lining. So we've got 3 layers here, and we're just gonna start tacking this down. So I'm gonna leave a small stitch on the top, only probably a 1/4 of an inch, not even. Yeah, more like a 1/4 of an inch. So I'm gonna pull that through, pull my little, trim the little tails out because I want them to show. Because if they get sucked up in there, I want to get them back out. Okay. And so I'm just going to go up the side here. So I'm doing a little stitch on the surface right here, from here to here. So I'm only going this little space. That's my surface stitch, but then I'm pushing that curved needle at least a quarter, 3/8 to a half an inch away to come up at the next section. And then when you've got a big long piece of thread, it's good to try to keep it from getting tangled up. So I'm going back in close to where I came out, but then I'm going to go further down the road here to tunnel on the inside. Okay, and then I'm going to hold this so it doesn't get my little tails in there, because we like that little fringy effect there. We don't want any of that getting stuck. And you can see none of it's going through to the other side. So I'm just going to keep doing this process as we go. So getting back to working on Formation World Tour. So a lot of people want to know, you know, how did you get that gig? How did they find you? How did you know, how do these celebrities find you? So I worked for probably 10 years for this production company in Orlando that provides the production crew for concert tour stuff. So if you have a local arena, stadium, any kind of venue, big venue, civic center, they have companies that they hire to local crew to build their stages. And that's how I started out. I used to do concert production, and I was a stagehand, so I would do build the stages, literally, put things together. I worked production. Mostly when I did production, I worked lighting, lasers, pyrotech. Those were the main things. I've done a little audio. It's not my favorite. I always preferred to do lighting, LED walls, building LED walls, all of that kind of stage building stuff that happens on concert tours. So I started out doing that, and one day, this was back in the 90s, my boss said, "Hey, do you know how to sew?" And I said, "Yeah, I do actually." And she said, "They need some help in wardrobe." And I was like, "Okay." So I went for the first time, and who knew wardrobe was a thing? Back in the day, in the 90s, a lot of the concert tours were rock bands. So rock bands didn't really do a lot of costume changes. Like, it was right around the same time of Napster and all of that. So like these bigger concert tours like Formation World Tour and these they just weren't really doing it that much until like Napster happened. Then these artists had to, because people were just downloading their music and starting these music subscription services. So instead of making as much money in record sales, they had to support their music by going on tour. So I was one of the people that was working this concert production, and usually, like I said, it was rock shows, so they don't change their clothes a lot. They just wear t-shirts and jeans, and they weren't, that big into other than a few artists like Alice Cooper, Marilyn Manson, most of these rock artists just didn't change their clothes very much. So when these pop artists started touring, then there was a lot of dancers, there was a lot of production, there was a lot of staging, and it just became a bigger show than what concert tours had been in the past. It was more of a entertainment and performance besides just watching the band play. So during these on these concert tours, I found out, the wardrobe is a thing, and it was a lot cleaner cleaner than when I was building stages. I'd be black and blue and rip my pants and dirty and whatever, and it was hard work. It was a lot harder work as far as physical labor. So I realized, so there's another job on a concert tour that the riggers do, the guys who get up in the ceiling and get up in the air and rig all the lighting and all of that so that they can fly, all those PA systems and stuff and curtains and drapes and all of that. I could get rigger pay. So those guys got paid more money than the people on the ground because they had to climb. But doing wardrobe and seamstress work, specifically seamstress, so wardrobe paid better than the regular stagehand work. And then if you could sew, then you could get even a bigger bump in pay by about, back then it was like comparing $17 an hour to work production to $35 an hour to sew. So I realized, okay, I guess I better, I can do this instead. So then, I ended up becoming one of the few handful of people. There wasn't anybody really with this production company who was not only reliable for being able to sew, but also knew a bunch of other people that could sew, because when I got hired to do Formation World Tour from my production company, connection boss, they not only needed me, but I became the lead of the local crew because they needed, a half a dozen other seamstresses and pattern makers and people to bang out all this stage wear they needed for the concert tour. So the tour for Formation was a lot of dancers. They had probably 20 dancers at least. And we were working on so the way that tour worked as far as the wardrobe goes. And Marnie explains this in the Formation World Tour behind the scenes video, which I am featured in. It's on YouTube. It's I can post it in my Patreon. I think I might have, but if not, I'll post it. The Formation World Tour, so they basically put out a request for proposal to all of these huge fashion design houses: Balenciaga, Gucci, Balmain, just everybody that you can think of that is in the big couture fashion world, to propose some designs for Beyonce. And so in that process, they got dozens of different proposed designs for her to wear. And then Beyonce and her stylist and, whoever else was on her team, they went through all the submissions and then they decided which ones they wanted to go with. So then the design houses made the costumes for the super high-end couture costumes for Beyonce. So, you can see what was crazy on that tour was there were dozens, probably, I want to say there were about 17 different looks on that tour. And that's so what we were working on. I did work on a few things for Beyonce herself. But what we were primarily working on was the making costumes for the dancers to match the super high-end couture costume designs for Beyonce. So those costumes were, and I still have some of the scraps from this. I call it my celebrity scraps. I actually did a museum exhibit of my collection of scraps, celebrity scraps from all these concert tour clothing builds, dancer costume builds. And so they would take Beyonce's costume as the theme, and then they would design dancer costumes to go along with her high-end couture look. So there were a couple designers doing that. I can't remember the name of the guy that we were working with, like hand in hand. But they were having custom fabrics made. Like, for example, there's a Gucci Ghost kind of fabric that was white on red. Well, that fabric was not made by Gucci. It was made by, I'm sure they had to get licensing agreements with Gucci to use that image to make the costumes for the dancers. And I can post some of those photos along with this post or in another post. So our job was we had to draft the patterns. So one of the people on our team was a pattern maker. We had to, they did figure out some of the fabrics ahead of time and had the fabrics when we got there. They had them printed, custom printed fabrics in California. And that's now a big part of my business and design house. As a costume designer, I do a lot of custom fabrics for my clients. So when I did the costume designs for the Lego World Parade and for Enchant Christmas, there were a lot of fabrics that we designed that had their logos in it and different things like that. So that's a pretty normal part of my job as a costume designer. So we were taking those fabrics, creating all the patterns, doing all the grading. So all of this was being done at Raymond James Stadium in Tampa, Florida, meanwhile, Beyonce was finishing the recording of Lemonade. So people like, was it Lil Wayne, I think, was involved in that project. So they were hanging around, the venue. They had literally set up a mobile recording studio on property at the stadium to finish recording everything. And then not only did they do the release, they did the drop for Lemonade when it came out during the time we were building these costumes for Formation. and rehearsing for the tour, they also dropped her Ivy Park clothing line. And we got to see all of the pieces that the dancers all got multiple pieces from that collection. And part of those were some of the costumes for the tour. So they incorporated some of those looks into the concert tour wardrobe. So it was cool to see all of those all of that clothing come in. Really beautiful fabrics. They were wearing, I think she gifted all the dancers pretty much a little capsule collection of her Ivy Park collection, because they were wearing it for rehearsals and things like that during the rehearsals. Some of the other things that were super crazy about that tour was that there was security guards there probably about every 10 feet or so. There would be a security guard just sitting on a chair, because in the hallways of the venue, so Raymond James Stadium is, it's a football stadium. It's where the Tampa Bay Bucks play football. The Bucks. Sorry, I'm not a sports person. But so it has like locker rooms. So we had one of the locker rooms where we converted into a sewing room, and the designers were there was showers in there, and so that was the space where we were making all these costumes. And then they were having rehearsals in some of there's like spaces inside these stadium venues where they have rehearsal rooms and things like that. So while all these like that, her whole wardrobe setup was the biggest, most what do you call it, gratuitous overabundance of designs. There was just so much. They basically created, I think it was about 17 different looks, and then only, I believe it was 5 of them ever hit the stage to this day, even though we were working for several weeks on these. The whole time they were doing rehearsals, we were working on the wardrobe. So, and then in the hallway, up and down the hallway, it was like a shoe store. So for every wardrobe outfit, there were also multiple different shoe looks. So not only do the performers change their outfits, they also change their shoes. So all up and down the hallway of the venue in the back, it literally looked like a shoe store, because they would have runs of shoes in a bunch of, pretty much all the sizes, all up the wall. So you would see like this particular boot, and then they had, well, think about it. They had 20 different dancers and probably some understudies. And then they had like the full gamut range of shoe sizes. So it literally looked like a shoe store in the back hallways of the venue, outside of the dressing rooms and outside of the rehearsal rooms. It was crazy. It was like a shoe store. So they had security guards all over the place, because there was just literally hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of costumes and accessories and everything everywhere all at once. So, and then like some of the other things that were there, they had a tent, like a setup for the dancers that was where they could just go get a massage. Catering, their whole food setup was always on shows like that with a lot of dancers. They have really healthy options for food, all fresh fruits and vegetables. They would always have like a juicing station. And of course, we, as the seamstress team for the costume build, we had access to all of that. So in the morning, you could come in and have like make your own juice, with the juicer, with fresh fruits and vegetables. There was, a chef there making pancakes or waffles or just constant. The whole catering there was part of our part of the project because, we were there working pretty long hours. And we'd start in the morning and we'd be there basically the whole time. It was a lot like the whole Super Bowl halftime show rehearsals where they were there from morning till late into the evening, practicing and rehearsing the dances. And then at night they would fire up. So they built her crazy multi-million-dollar stage with the gigantic video screens. There were aerialists kind of inside the tower of the stage. It was probably one of the craziest stages I've ever seen in my life. I haven't really seen anything crazier than that one. And so the stages, they would rehearse at night. So at night, when it got dark, they would fire up the whole setup and rehearse on the stage. So during the rehearsals at night, we weren't usually there that late at night because we would probably work 8 or 10 hours during the day, and then they would do more rehearsals in the evening so that they could run all the lights and the pyro and all the things that went along with that performance at nighttime so that they could see it the way it was going to look during the performance. So that went on for like 30 days of rehearsals at least. And so during those rehearsals, Beyonce was not on the stage. She would sit in this little tent about, in the middle of the field, and she would sit in there with a microphone and kind of direct and produce the whole stage show. So she would sit there and they had someone who was standing in for her. So the person that was standing in for her was like lip syncing to the songs and then dancing with the dancers to the dance moves. And she would sit in the tent and make them start and stop and start and stop and start and stop. And that's kind of what happens during rehearsals normally. That's pretty normal. All right, I want to show you what I'm doing right here. So my thread that I was using ran out, so now I'm adding a new piece. So I'm just jumping it to the other piece. And then what I'm going to do is I tied it in a bunch of knots, but I'm going to bury the ends in the embroidery so you can't see it. So let me trim this off a little bit. And then I'm gonna bury it in here so you can't see it. I'm just gonna go right into here. That'll pull it into this little black hole area. Boop. And so the whole knot and everything just disappeared. And then I'm just gonna go back to tacking this all along the edge, and then I'm gonna go back through and sew some of this, tack some of this down. So I've worked a bunch of concert tours where they would have these rehearsal days, usually at the beginning of the tour. Well, always at the beginning of the tour, not usually, it's pretty standard. So that's where they rehearse, they do their live rehearsals on top of whatever rehearsals they've been doing remotely or in dance studios in California, because now they have all the dancers there and everybody's getting prepared for the tour. They're doing the fittings of all the wardrobe. They're doing the choreography. They're working out all the rest of the choreography. And I've seen other performers like Janet Jackson do this. She would have a rehearsal day. They'll rent out the arena or the stadium a few days before the tour starts so that they can rehearse on stage and make sure all of the elements of the stage works. If there's any automation or things like that, sync all the videos up, sync all the choreography up, and just work out all the last minute stuff. And usually the artist themselves is not on stage with everybody else. They're usually sitting in the audience watching it because they want to see it from the audience's perspective. And so then they will have someone stand in to perform in their place. A lot of times it's their choreographer, and they don't necessarily sing, but they'll lip sync. And they'll have the microphone because the choreographers usually, or some of them have a headset. It just depends on, sometimes it depends on the song too, how it's going to be performed. So I've sat there. One time, actually, I was sitting, I was working for Janet Jackson, and they were doing a rehearsal day. And so she was sitting in the seats up ahead of me, in the front. And they were also rehearsing with the cameramen and the spotlights and all of that. So they were rehearsing too, because there's choreography and timing to all of that. And I'm sitting in the audience behind Janet. She's up ahead of me. And then the cameramen were there on the stage, and they panned to the audience and they panned to me. So there I am. I appeared on the gigantic screen on the stage, and I was like, oh, and I kind of like tried to duck, and I heard her she laughed because I wasn't planning on being on camera. I was just taking my break and just happened to be sitting there watching because I could. So yeah, that's my watching Janet Jackson, my 5 minutes with her. But yeah, there's a bunch of more stories about, I'll do Janet Jackson on another day, but I'll just leave that one there. But yeah, so these artists, Paul McCartney, they will have these rehearsal days before they go out on tour. So on the Formation World Tour, that was a pretty crazy stage. They had also this water feature on in the performance where they flooded this runway with water, and they would dance in the water and it would splash all over the place. So they had some pretty unique features on that show, on that tour. But there was definitely a lot going on behind the scenes with her wardrobe, A lot of the things we were doing were, for example, we had Balmain. So Balmain had sent some lingerie style bodysuits with lace like this, but it was French lace and it was very delicate. And if you pushed your finger like this, like I can tell this lace is polyester. If you pushed that lace too hard with your finger, you could poke your finger right through it. So I don't know if you've ever had any fancy lingerie like that with that delicate lace, but that's how it was. So there were these white bodysuits on that tour that were a lace upper, and then it had a button down closure and like a little cotton panty bottom. And they wanted to convert it to stage wear that the dancers could wear on stage. When Beyonce had her black outfit on with the hat, or no, I think the dancers wore black in that one. I'll have to pull up the photos to see what outfit she was wearing when they were wearing these. I think she was in white also. So what we had to do to those bodysuits was we had to we had to pull out the button panel, because that's not going to work when you have to quick change. You can't get in and out of something quick as a dancer in between songs quick enough if you have to unbutton things. So there's this whole aspect of my job that's called costume rigging. So part of it is costume rigging. You rig these costumes, even the couture that was Beyonce's couture designs. All of that had to be rigged so that she could get, because you're not going to leave those little shitty fashion zippers in there, that are teeny weeny. You have to replace them with like a number 5 big fat plastic zipper so that it's durable and it's fast and easy to get in and out of these costumes in between songs for the performers. So that's part of the costume rigging process for quick change. So that's called quick change costume rigging. So that's part of what we were doing. And then the other part was we had to reinforce these designs so that the little cotton panties that came with the bodysuit were a little bit see-through. The fabric was pretty delicate. And they had a snap crotch, which we were going to take out of there because we don't want their crotch blowing open on them while they're on stage. So we had to swap all that out with like a swimwear bottom panty. So we basically would make a pattern for the swimwear bottoms. We had to grade it because there was all the different size dancers. And then we removed the cotton panty that came with the design and replaced it with the spandex. We did them in spandex panty that's more like a dance lollipop, which actually they might have just bought some off the rack and sewn them on. So that's part of costume rigging stuff that I do all the time as working for these celebrities and these concert tours. Even with shirts, a lot of times, like if someone was wearing some kind of a shirt, it could even be a tuxedo shirt. If the dancers are moving all over the place, you want their shirt to stay tucked in. You don't want it to like when they put their arms up, you don't want the shirt to ride up and then stay all bunched up around their waist. You want it to stay tucked in. So one of the things we do for rigging, for costume rigging, is we'll take a pair of underwear and sew it, cut the shirt off at the waist where it's going to be tucked, and then basically turn the shirt into a bodysuit so that it'll stay tucked in. And then they'll put their pants on over it, or whatever their bottoms are, over that. And that way their shirt will stay tucked in. They can move around, dance around, do cartwheels, whatever, and it won't come untucked. So that's another type of rigging that we do to these costumes so that they can perform in them. And then we also make it, we have to figure out a way to make it quick for the dancer to get in and out of it really fast. So a lot of times we'll merge layers of things together. Like if someone's got a jacket with a shirt under it, we might just take the front of the shirt and sew it to the inside of the jacket and have like some snaps or something on the, like make it like a dickie. Back in the day, you know, if you ever lived up north, where you would have this fake little turtleneck that was just a turtleneck, and then you'd wear it under a shirt. So it looked like you had another layer on, but it was actually just the collar part that would stick up, so you wouldn't be as hot. So it's that kind of premise to create these layered looking costume designs, but you merge the layers together. We also did a lot of that in the theme parks. When I worked in the theme parks, especially on the Harry Potter costumes, because J.K. Rowling initially didn't give a lot of consideration to the fact that the show was in Florida and she was from the UK. And when you try to dress performers in wool fabrics and multiple layers, it's not very the performers get hot, they pass out. So we had to figure out ways to make her costumes the way she wanted them to look, but merge down some of the layers so that the performers would not pass out because it was so hot. So that's part of the costume rigging. Costume rigging is a whole kind of secret theater tricks, sewing tricks, and ways of building clothing that are good for quick changes, and also keeping all the layers of something together so that, you know, it's easier to manage when everything is all sewn together in one piece. It's easier to manage when you're doing the laundry. It's easier to manage when you're laying everything out for quick change. So, I don't know, am I out of the frame? So that's a huge part of the work that I do and the job that I do is costume rigging. And it's a thing in the theme parks. It's a thing in entertainment. There's just so many different tricks of that trade that are you learn in the entertainment industry. So some of the costume rigging things we had to do on Formation World Tour was there were these Gucci tops, and I think there were some photos of them in the behind the scenes video, but those were one of the costumes that never made it to the stage. I've never seen any of them in public. So that was like a bodysuit, another bodysuit, and they had all this beading on the front, so it looked like all the dancers were wearing these necklaces. But you've got to condense that so that they don't have time to sit there and fasten a bunch of necklaces around their neck in between songs. So we would sew the necklaces to the shirt, so it would look like they were wearing, all these 20 necklaces in layers of necklaces, but they were actually sewn to the shirt. So the downside to that is when you sew all those accessories, then you can't throw it in the washing machine. So you have to hand wash that stuff. So a lot of the clothing on concert tours is hand washed, and then you get clothing racks to put it on backstage after the show or when they're done wearing it. So on a concert tour, the normal kind of run of show is, while the show's going on, as soon as they're done wearing a costume, usually there's a wardrobe runner, and their whole job, the whole show, is to just take the costumes that they're done with, the discards, and do the only thing they have to do while the show's going on is run the discard, the done costumes, run them backstage to wardrobe so they can start. So then there's another person backstage who is doing the laundry and starting to put everything away. So there's two things you're going to do. You're either going to wash it right there before the show leaves, or you've got to somehow secure it or treat it in a way that some costumes might be worn again. It depends on, how much under layers they have and what kind of a costume piece it is, because some pieces, so when you can't wash something, if you can't just throw it in the washing machine, and you can't hand wash it, usually, like, for example, super high-end pieces like Taylor Swift's red kind of like circus ringmaster jacket that was massive amounts of beads, and Swarovski, that jacket weighed like 50 pounds, probably 30 to 50 pounds. You can't, how do you wash that? It's a bunch of beads, it's a bunch of, so what you do is, her ringleader jacket specifically, she didn't put that on the normal way through the front and put her arms through it. That jacket she went in it through the back. So she put her arms in there, and then they would put her jacket on her through the back, and then they would zip it up. So then when that jacket came off, when she was done with that song, the way we treat those clothes that can't be laundered is you spray it with vodka. So vodka spray is a huge part of theatrical, wardrobe, Broadway show, concert tour, theme park. Well, some theme parks won't let you have vodka because stupid people will drink it, but it's very common. So when you spray a garment with vodka spray, ideally the person's going to have garments on that are washable. They're not going to wear that kind of a costume piece directly against their skin. So they're going to have an undershirt or something on underneath, so that it protects the costume from getting sweaty. But the costumes are going to get, you know, they're worn. They're going to get a little sweat in them. So then what we do is we vodka spray that costume where all the sweat is. So you spray it in the armpits. You spray it like maybe in the front of the chest, the back of the chest. If it's pants, you spray it in the crotch, maybe the back, the lower back. So anywhere where that costume would have gotten wet because of sweat, when you spray it with vodka, it disinfects it like kills the germs, disinfects it, keeps it from getting stinky, keeps it from getting moldy. So if you have some costume pieces that are straight off the stage, they might be a little sweaty, but you can't wash them till like the next day at the next venue, then we'll spray them with vodka in the pits and the crotch and everywhere so that it can just be okay to travel till the next day where it can be washed. So that's another like common practice in the costuming industry, for concert tours, Broadway shows, theme park. We did it in the theme park when Universal was owned by Seagram's, because Seagram's had vodka and they supplied it, I guess. But then when Universal got bought by NBC, they did away with the vodka spray. But it might have also, so something you can do to keep people from drinking it, you can put some essential oils in there, like tea tree oil. I've been on concert tours where they tell you, okay, this has tea tree oil in it, so don't drink it because that makes it poison. So hopefully people won't drink it, but sometimes, I mean, people do that. All right, so for the most part, this is tacked. And then I have to go back through here because there's a little section that overlaps. So I'm going to go back here and overlap that. So this, trying to think about anything else on Formation World Tour. One of the other things we rigged was their shoes. So like if a dancer has a pair of shoes that have to be tied, like with shoelaces, we'll swap out the shoelaces with elastic ties, and we'll try to rig the shoes so that they can get in and out of the shoes without having to untie them. Sometimes we'll add a zipper to a shoe, or we'll replace, like maybe a shoe has, like if you get a shoe that has an ankle strap, there's rigging you can do so that you know how it has that little buckle on it? There's rigging you can do to turn that into a snap or some other type of closure so that the performer can just quickly get in and out of that shoe without having to buckle it. That happens a lot on Broadway shows, but also on the concert tours, so that you can get in and out of it quick rigging, quick change, that type of it's an alteration that you do. Look, see, I'm not going all the way through. It's looking good on the inside. So those are some of the things that we do with costume rigging. I think what I'm gonna do is fast forward through the rest of this so you can just watch me do the rest of this quickly. And if you have any comments or questions, put it in the comments. If you want to message me, you can. My website is at ginavincenza.com, GINAVINCENZA.com. If you're seeing this content somewhere else other than on my own social media, please find me and follow me. You can find me as Gina Vincenza. My last name is Van Epps. It's 2 words, Van Epps. Or I have Psycho Seamstress on YouTube, on social media, and on some other websites. I also have House of Vincenza. That's VINCENZA. So House of Vincenza is my design house. So that also gets, I run a lot of work through my design house. So the way I run my design house, I guess I can talk about this, is I do fashion, I do costumes, and I have a whole collection of people that I work with who specialize in different things. Some people might do pattern making or tech packs, or just will do production sewing, costume sewing, fashion production. So when I get a project, because I have, oh, there went my thread. I'm gonna have to grab it. Oh, it rolled right to me. Thank you. When I get big projects, I don't do all the work myself. A lot of times I'll hire other people, especially if something's on a tight deadline and I need to bang it out. I hire other people who can help me. I usually try to find the best person for the job. So if it's a seamstress or a pattern maker, or I need some specific thing sewn. Sometimes I do things like 3D printing on different accessories. So there's a lot of different aspects to the projects that I do. And so I have a collective of people that are also like myself, freelance. Some of them work in the theme parks and things, but they work remotely, or they're available for hire to work on random projects. So I run my design house as a collective of people, and depending on what you need to have done, I sort out who is the best person for the job. So I'll curate people like on projects like Enchant Christmas. Sometimes I'll go on Etsy and see if there's anybody on Etsy that's already doing something that I need for a show. So some of the stuff I do on these shows might be, like for example, on Enchant, we had so many different elements to that project. Some of the things I did were fiber optic hoods. So I initially tried to, so this is where I'll partner with designers and other people I know in the area who, one of my one of my regular people that I partner with, her name is Melanie Wargo, and she does fiber optic designs for a lot of EDC shows like Electric Daisy Carnival or electronic dance music festivals like Burning Man and things like that. So instead of me trying to figure out how to do fiber optics, I'll hire someone like her, and then she'll handle that part of the project, the fiber optics part. So when I got opportunity to design some costumes for a Broadway show, Melanie handled the fiber optics part of the costumes. So we did these kind of butterfly fairy costumes for this Broadway show, and so we made the butterfly part, and then we brought it over to her, and then she installed the fiber optics into the design. With Enchant Christmas, we did elves that had fiber optics under their costumes, and they would the fiber optics would light up under the fabric, and the little ends of the fiber optics, hang on, oh, I had to check, make sure I wasn't going all the way through. The little ends would light up, the tips of the fiber optics would light up under the costume, so it made these little like light points, and then it caused the whole costume to just kind of have this glow to it. So that was part of the special effects we did on those costumes for Enchant Christmas. We also I partnered with another local designer who she also does EDC, EDM, Burning Man type stuff, and her fiber optic designs are woven into fabrics, fiber optic fabric, and she does these hoods. And so I used her hood design, but instead of wearing it with the fiber optics on the outside, we put the hoods inside out so that the fiber optics would light up the faces of the elves. So it just gave them, because this was Enchant Christmas is a holiday light attraction in cities all around the country. The second year I did it, they were in 9 cities. I think this past year they did it in 5 cities. And they rent out a stadium and install this huge light show, all these like Wonderland light displays. And then they have games and ice skating, and Santa and Mrs. Claus, who I designed their costumes for the Santa and Mrs. Claus and the elves, and some other characters that were part of the shows and the entertainment that they had. And then I also designed boots. We had a hard time finding elf boots that we could order in bulk. I found this really great designer on Etsy, but he said, well, I can only make, 3 pairs of shoes a week. And I needed like 300 pairs of shoes. So I asked him for permission we used his designs as inspiration to design an elf shoe that was an exclusive design for Enchant Christmas. So I designed some boots, some tall boots, and some pointy toe elf boots for their characters. And they had about 300 pairs made. So I know those types of shoes were hard to find, and we wanted them in their show colors. So when I put them into production, we did them in like the blue and gray colors to match the costumes. So as you can see, now I'm going through and just tacking the lace down randomly to tack it to the fabric. And I'm just trying to, in this particular case, I'm just trying to use up the rest of this thread. So I'm just going to tack it until I run out of thread. And a lot of people also like to know how to hide knots and stuff like this. So I will do a stitch like this, and then I'll loop it through the loop in a couple different places. So then I'm gonna put my needle back in close to where I just came out. Then I'm gonna go a little further away and do that again. So I'm gonna go back in and put my needle through the loop. So I'm basically just tying knots with the last few inches, last 6 inches of my thread, or the last 12 inches I start is when I start doing it. So now this is about my third knot. So I'm gonna stick it through there. And then to hide the end, so I'm gonna poke it back in where I came out, and then instead of cutting the thread right here and leaving the tails sticking out, I push the thread back in, and then I'm gonna cut it over here so that the tails are gonna end up inside the corset, so I don't have them sticking out and I don't have to worry about trying to find them and trim them later. So there we go. So it's coming along.